For God's sake, how much more carnage are we willing to accept? How many more innocent American lives must be taken before we say enough, enough? I know that we can't prevent every tragedy, but here's what I believe we have to do. Here's what the overwhelming majority of American people believe we must do. Here's what the families in Buffalo and Uvalde in Texas told us we must do. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And if we can't ban assault weapons, then we should raise the age to purchase them from 18 to 21. Strengthen background checks. Enact safe storage law and red flag laws. Repeal the immunity that protects gun manufacturers from liability. Address the mental health crisis, deepening the trauma of gun violence and as a consequence of that violence.
In the United States, the Investigative Assistance for Violent Crimes Act of 2012 defines mass killings as 3 or more killings in a single incident. However, the act does not define mass shootings. The motive for mass shootings is a defining feature in that they are usually committed by deeply disgruntled individuals seeking revenge or payback for failures in school, career, romance, and just life in general. If multiple people are shot in robbery or killed in a terrorist attack, these deaths are also not included under the definition of mass shootings. I wonder why. Just an hour ago, President Joe Biden addressed the nation of its latest mass shooting involving 18-year-old Salvador Rolando Ramos, who fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers and wounded 17 other people at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Biden's ultimate resolution to the problem of mass shootings? Stricter gun regulations, and even the notion of banning assault weapons. An idea once proposed by previous administrations that had slight alterations to state law, but nothing constitutional. However, the actual problem is not with the weapon itself, but instead the hypocrisy of the adherents of the left. In the last 2 weeks, many major left propagandists on viral media, as well as pundits, and even congressional leaders of the Democratic Party had voiced their outrage over the deaths of the last 2 weeks, where we had over 10 mass shootings. Yet, these same people from the establishment left have remained remarkably silent when it comes to the largest manufacturer of weapons and weapon sales to countries that have some of the worst human rights records on this planet. The fact that the United States government and those of the left to suddenly care about human life when under the Obama administration and currently under Biden, these administrations have conducted war crimes and crimes against humanity as outlined by the Rome Statutes by either participating in wars, which have killed tens of thousands, or have given billions of dollars in weapons to countries which use them to kill people by the thousands. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a lot regarding, say, mass shootings and the hypocrisy of the left when it comes to them suddenly caring about the deaths of children. And as you can see in this graph, which is provided by Gun Violence Archive, there in just the month of May, you have over 20 somewhat shootings here, mass shootings, including the Uvalde mass shooting right here. Okay. We have a problem in this country. The problem is violence. And what precipitates said violence? Well, they're not going to tell you that problem because the problem isn't about the weapon. It's the use of the weapon. Now, when it comes to the left, as well as the right, but mainly the left, because they're outraged all of a sudden. The largest exporter of weapons is the United States, by far and large. And as you can see in this graph by Statista, we sell more weapons to Saudi Arabia than any country on the face of the earth. And these are the countries we sell the most weapons to in terms of exportation in the year 2021. Saudi Arabia, Australia, Qatar, United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Netherlands, Israel, boy, Norway, India, United Arab Emirates, Denmark, and Italy. Now, A lot of these countries are coalition countries. Australia, United Kingdom, Denmark, Italy. And some of these countries have abhorrent human rights records. Need I tell you, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel. And I could say a word or two about India. But let's keep it simple. Saudi Arabia, the country that is engaging in the worst humanitarian crisis on earth by far and wide in the Yemen conflict. The country in which the United States continues to cover using the Department of Justice regarding their financial payments to two Al-Qaeda operatives who were involved with the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. The United States government under Bush, under Obama, under Trump, and now President Biden continue to cover up Saudi Arabia from being sued by the victims' families. I'll repeat, the United States government under the current Biden administration continues to cover up Saudi Arabia from being sued by 9/11 victims' families. And here I thought they served us, the best interests of the people. Need I remind you that Saudi Arabia also is run by a repressive monarchy, and also were involved with the murder of a U.S. journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, in which nobody was ever held accountable, not even for the Yemen conflict, not for 9/11, and not for Jamal Khashoggi's murder. I'm just getting started. Let's go to the U.S. weapons exporting, right? Because there's nobody on the face of the earth that exports more weapons than the United States. But under Reuters, December 22nd, 2021, U.S. weapons exports decreased 21% to $138 billion in fiscal 2021. Remarkable. That is remarkable. $138 billion in weapons export sales. Sales of U.S. military equipment to foreign governments fell to 21% to $138 billion in the latest fiscal year. The U.S. State Department said on Wednesday, as the Biden administration shifts away from some of the more aggressive arms sales practices under former President Donald Trump. The U.S. State Department disclosed military sales figures for the 2021 fiscal year, which ended on September 30th. Sales included $3.5 billion worth of AH-64E Apache attack helicopters to Australia, a coalition partner, and $3.4 billion worth of CH-53K helicopters to Israel. I wonder how much of that went to the Palestinians so they could defend themselves. Sales of U.S. military equipment in the prior fiscal year had totaled $175 billion. Jeez. President Joe Biden's administration shifted away from selling offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia due to civilian casualties in Yemen, and intends to announce a new weapons export policy that emphasizes human rights when evaluating arms sales. Yeah, right, Uncle Joe. Yeah, we believe that. But I'll get back to that in a minute. For those who are thinking that, oh, well, I mean, that didn't happen under Obama, here's a reminder. And this is from Reuters, dated August 1st, 2012. Obama authorizes secret U.S. weapons support for Syrian rebels. Well, hope and change. The progressives were behind Obama because Bush was a nasty authoritarian. Here's a real neocon who catered to the weapons manufacturers of LG3 Technologies, Boeing and Raytheon. Obama wouldn't dare do that. Well, President Barack Obama signed a secret order authorizing U.S. support for rebels. By the way, the rebels are usually always terrorists. You know, the ones that were supposed to be fighting in the war on terror, Al-Qaeda affiliates, who are seeking to depose Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his government. U.S. sources familiar with the matter said. Obama's order, approved earlier this year and known as an intelligence finding, broadly permits the CIA and other U.S. agencies to provide support that could help the rebels oust Assad. By the way, this was a construction of the CIA under General David Petraeus, who's the director, who actually proposed this idea in 2010 to President Obama. Basically was supported by the Kingdom of Jordan, as well as the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, who pressured Obama to basically authorize and consent to this operation, in which we trained and gave weapons to these Al-Qaeda affiliates who were suddenly rebels. Sounds familiar? We did this in 1979 when the CIA, under Operation Cyclone, sent billions of dollars to rebels who basically were Mujahideen fighters who later became Al-Qaeda, Abu Sayyaf, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Boko Haram, and later on Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. The White House is, for now, apparently stopping short of giving rebels lethal weapons, as some U.S. allies do just that. Basically, the United States gave them lethal weapons, including M15s and M50 and fighter jets and whatnot. We trained them and armed them, and basically we wanted to connect the coup d'etat against Assad, because basically Assad is actually fighting the very people that we're actually funding in Libya and Syria, in Afghanistan and Iraq. Need more? Under the Cato Institute, dated January 10, 2020, the Obama administration wrecked Libya for a generation. By the way, hope and change, right? You care about children, you care about human life, yet these are the people that you support. Libya's ongoing destruction belongs to Hillary Clinton more than anyone else. You know, the same woman that you voted for against Trump because you thought Trump was some sleazy, sexy dirtbag that you women hated so much. Well, here's the woman that you supported. It was she who pushed President Barack Obama to launch his splendid little war, backing the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi, who in 1997 actually proposed the first warrant against Osama bin Laden, in the name of protecting Libya's civilians. When later asked about Gaddafi's death, she cackled and exclaimed, "We came, we saw, he died." Alas, this was not the last death in the conflict, which has flared anew, turning Libya into a real-life Game of Thrones, an artificial country already suffering from deep regional divisions. Libya has further torn apart by political and religious differences. One commander fighting on behalf of the Government of National Accord, the GNA, Salim bin Ismail, told the BBC, "We've had chaos since 2011. Thanks to the CIA, thanks to Hillary Clinton, and thanks to the Obama administration." Well, at least in his biography, Obama said it was his biggest mistake, and it wouldn't be his last. Need I remind you, he kept open Guantanamo Bay. Need I remind you, he's actually allowing the NSA to wiretap every single American here and abroad, allowing your private cell phone companies such as AT&T to give the NSA all your data without a warrant. Hope and change, right? Well, going back to the Biden administration about, restrictions on Saudi Arabia. According to Political, Senate backs Biden administration weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. Hooah! Dated December 7th, 2021. The Senate on Tuesday gave a bipartisan vote of confidence to the Biden administration's proposed weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. The same country that gave us 9/11, that murdered Jamal Khashoggi, and actually used these U.S. weapons on Yemeni civilians, blunting criticisms from progressives and some Republicans of the kingdom's involvement in the Yemen civil war and its human rights records. In a 67-30 vote, the Senate handily defeated an effort at blocking $650 million of air-to-air missiles and related equipment to Saudi Arabia, a longtime U.S. strategic ally. Exporting more missiles to Saudi Arabia does nothing but further this conflict and pour gasoline on already raging fires, said Senator Bernie Sanders. This is the reason why he was not given the Democratic electee who introduced the legislation to Senators Rand Paul, who you Democrats call a rhino. Basically a guy who basically isn't loyal to his Republican Party or to the country itself. Saudi Arabia is literally surrounded by violent threats conceived, funded, and orchestrated by Iran, said Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Imagine Iran surrounded by Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, it's the United States who have 30 military installations surrounding Iran. How many does Iran have surrounding the United States or Saudi Arabia? Try zero, a big fat zero. That's what you leftists gets for supporting the Obama and Biden administrations and claiming to care about human life. That's what you get, a big fat zero. And when it comes to the largest humanitarian crisis, which you, the people who support Biden and the people who support Trump, by the way, and I'm going to get to you, people of the right, in a later video, but let's keep it recent. In Yemen, the number of children killed or injured continued to increase as violence escalates. And this is from UNICEF. Dated March 12, 2022, following the intensification of the conflict in Yemen in 2021, violence has continued to escalate this year. And as always, children are the first and most to suffer. Over the first 2 months of 2022, that would be the Biden administration, thank you, 47 children were reportedly killed or maimed in several locations across the country. Since the conflict escalated in Yemen nearly 7 years ago, the United Nations has verified that more than 10,200 children have been killed or injured. The actual number is likely much higher. Yes, that would mean that this started under the Obama administration, continued under Trump, and continuing under Biden, who, by the way, promised during his presidential campaign that he would do something to curtail the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. And basically, when he got in office, one of the first things he did was approve of weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, and then did it again. So much for those progressive values, leftists. Jesus H. Christ. Biden announces new $150 million weapons package for Ukraine, but he cares about the children. U.S. President Joe Biden signed a new $150 million weapons package for Ukraine on Friday, providing additional artillery, munitions, radar, and other equipment in the latest in series of transfers to help Kiev repel Russia's invasion. Biden said in a statement that today the United States is continuing our strong support for the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their country against Russia's ongoing aggression. And of course, you leftists fell for it, because the reality is in 2014, the United States used far-right separatists to commit a coup d'etat against the democratically elected Viktor Yushchenko government. It was called the Revolution of Dignity, in which far-right separatists attacked the police and raided the Capitol and forced the overthrow of Yushchenko, in which an interim government basically took over and voted in favor unanimously, I think it was 214 or 314 to 0, against having Yushchenko return. And basically, the new president is a former comedian, reality TV star, much in the way of Donald Trump. And yet you make fun of Trump, but don't make fun of the current idiot in office in Ukraine, in which, by the way, you're continuing to send billions of dollars to these far-right separatists who are basically nationalist neo-Nazis. Sounds familiar? Again, I will use the same ideology. It was supported by the CIA in 1979. It was called the Mujahideen, an ultra-Orthodox far-right identity, basically, who were once allies and then later enemies. Well, isn't that the saying? To find out who are tomorrow's enemies, find out who are funding today. Despite violent Memorial Day weekend, Chicago police say homicide rates remain down in 2022. This is from WTTW in Chicago. Despite a surge in shootings over the Memorial Day weekend, the number of homicides in Chicago for the first 5 months of 2022 remained below the pace for each of the last 2 years. According to new data from the Chicago Police Department, there have been over 239 homicides, 971 shootings in the city throughout the year through the end of May. That homicide total marks a nearly 8% decline compared to the same time in 2021, and a 1% decline over the first 5 months of 2020, while citywide shootings are also down more than 50% this year over the last, according to the CPD data. Now, if this was actually a Republican state, if this was actually a Republican senator, you would never hear the end of it when it comes to CNN, CBS, ABC, and your literal fawning chihuahuas, these leftists who are paid by the DNC on Twitter and Facebook. You would never hear the end of it. But because it's a Democratic city, do you hear that? It's called crickets. Silence is deafening when it comes to gun regulation, right? But it's not about gun regulation. It's basically, this is the Democratic city. And because children and young people are getting killed in a city, you're not going to hear anything about them because, for one, they're minorities, and two, it's a blue state. This is what we call hypocrisy in its most definitive form. This is the reason why those of the left who are actually crocodile tearing over what happened in Uvalde, and as tragic and as heartbreaking as that is, you vile people of the left have some unmitigated nerve to actually think that you actually care about human life. Well, you're just as reprehensible as Trumpers. In fact, you're no different. You don't give two fucking shits about children or human life or the sanctity of life. You actually don't give a shit when it comes to the welfare of human beings. Because if you did, you wouldn't be voting for these fucking ghouls in Obama and Biden in the first place, knowing full well that voting precipitates the problem. No, you only care because you're like everything else in this fucking life and in this country. You politicize everything. And because of that, you're actually advocating for one side while derailing the other. Yet your own side is committing crimes against humanity in the name of you, and you continually support it. And the real crime, the real problem, the real crisis in this country that continues to get ignored is mental health disorder. Our doctors and nurses who were once heroes at the start of the pandemic are now vilified. They're fired left and right. Many of these hospitals, many of these institutions are basically understaffed, which are leading to the degradation of the welfare of those professionals and exacerbating the percentages of mental health in this country, which leads to mass shootings. Not to mention the pharmaceutical industry in this country, led by Johnson & Johnson, have made our healthcare professionals drug dealers. According to Johns Hopkins, the following are the latest statistics available for the National Institute of Mental Health Disorders, part of the National Institutes of Health. Mental health disorders account for several of the top causes of disability in established market economies, such as the United States, worldwide, and include major depression, manic depression, schizophrenia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. An estimated 26% of Americans ages 18 and older, about 1 in 4 adults, suffers from a diagnosable mental disorder in a given year. Many people suffer from more than one mental disorder at a given time. In particular, depressive illnesses tend to occur with substance abuse and anxiety disorders. Approximately 9.5% of American adults ages 18 and over will suffer from a depressive illness each year. Most people who commit suicide have a diagnosable mental disorder, most commonly a depressive disorder or a substance abuse disorder. Approximately 18% of people ages 18 to 54 in a given year have an anxiety disorder in a given year. Anxiety disorders include panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and phobias. Ladies and gentlemen, need I remind you that what's really happening in this country is that we're helping to precipitate the divide of the human community, whether it's politics, racism, sexism, religion. These are all unnatural properties. Basically, they're not learned. They're not innate in you. These are all human constructs that are made to divide you from each other. And the government is helping to precipitate this. It's happening right now. They politicized everything on this earth, including mass shootings. That's how low they are. That's how desperate they are to have you fight each other, and instead against the very institution that made you this way. And I have to bring up this issue regarding the Rome statutes, The Hague, which is the international courts. The United States is not a co-signer. Neither is Israel. Neither is North Korea. Neither is Iraq and 3 other countries. And yet, some of these countries have the worst human rights records on the face of the earth. When it comes to Israel, just take a look at what they've done to the Palestinians over the last 80 years. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, who are part of the Rome statutes, they're conducting war crimes, even as they are part of the international criminal community courts. And we continue to sell weapons to both countries. Well, with allies like this, who needs enemies? And for those who are basically saying, well, the citizenry, they don't need these weapons. They don't need military style weapons. Need I remind you, the mass amounts of crimes in which I elucidated in this video earlier, in which we have killed millions of people, millions in Central America, in Europe, and most recently in the Middle East, over the last 150 years. Our country is drenched in blood. It was formed in blood, most like most countries. But more importantly, this country, the country that you claim stands for democracy, that stands for human life, protecting human life and human values. Yet you continually vote for these people in office who don't care about human life, that don't care about human values, that will kill men, women, and children. And yet you people, the left, you can't claim to love children and care about human life and call for gun reform on American citizens, yet don't call for gun reform against the very institute that kill more people than any other government on the face of this planet. And as long as the military have these weapons, and as long as the military answers to the government, then I will never ask the American people to ever give up one single weapon or to have any weapons given to any law enforcement because they think the citizenry shouldn't have guns. This is the reason why we have guns in the first place.
Bà con chúng tôi sinh sống ở một cái làng quê rất là yên bình. Bỗng dưng vào 5 giờ 30 của buổi sáng ngày 16 tháng 3 số 8 là quân đội Mỹ bắn xối xả vào làng tôi. Đến hơn 8 giờ thì họ đến gia đình tôi. Là có 3 người lính Mỹ, 1 người da đen, 2 người da trắng. Bắt đầu họ bắn 3 con bò trong chuồng của nhà tôi và đốt cả nhà trên nhà dưới chuồng bò. Và họ dí súng vào trong người, họ bắt 6 mẹ con tôi chui lại vào cái hầm tránh phố của gia đình. Mẹ tôi bảo các con chui vào trước, mẹ chui vào sau để mẹ cản đạn cho các con. Mẹ tôi chui vào khỏi miệng hầm thì lính Mỹ đánh lựu đạn xuống tứ tấp. Thân xác của mẹ, chị và các em tôi đã tan tành. Đứa em gái út của tôi đứt làm đôi. Thì lúc này là tôi bị thương và tôi nằm thiếp ở trong cái ngôi hầm này. Mãi đến 4 giờ chiều Mỹ rút đi. Cha tôi và các người trong làng còn sót lại về để lượm xác chết lên để chôn. Thấy tôi còn thở. Khi mà ẵm tôi lên là mình đầy máu. Tóc mẹ, chị em tôi là coi như dính đầy trên người, trên quần áo tôi. Quần áo tôi thì cũng rất tả tơi, không còn gì cả và tôi bị thương nhiều chỗ ở trong người và trong đầu.